At the time of the Persian invasion under Xerxes, Sparta was the greatest power in Greece, and her generals sat at the top of the chain of command for those great battles. But after the Persians retreated, the Greek cities decided that they no longer preferred Spartan leadership and turned their allegiance to Athens because of Aristides the Just. Now, this was the Athenian statesman whom the allies trusted to make a fair assessment of their tax contributions to the alliance. Plutarch writes, "The Greeks desired Aristides of the Athenians to assess everyone according to what they were worth, laying the tax not only without corruption and injustice, but to the satisfaction and convenience of all. And as long as Athens was governed by Aristides and Cimon, the allies lived in what Plutarch calls the happy time of Greece. And Athenian popularity was so great that Argos joined the Confederacy in 462 BC, and Megara did the same in 456. Athens added Boeotia and Aegina by conquest, and involved themselves in a Libyan revolt against the Persian Empire, during which they even occupied 2/3 of Memphis, and that marks the height of Athenian power. From this time forward, the Athenian Empire will do nothing but contract. Even that conquest of Boeotia will be short-lived. The Thebans will win back their independence before the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War. And in the 440s BC, the Euboeans and the Megarians revolted at the same time. Plutarch writes, "The Euboeans revolted, against whom he, as in Pericles, passed over with forces. And then, immediately after, news came that the Megarians were turned their enemies, and a hostile army was upon the borders of Attica." And Plutarch writes this about the vengeance of Pericles against the Euboeans, that he reduced their cities and drove out the citizens of the Chalcidians, the chief persons for wealth and reputation among them. Thucydides tells us that not long after their return from Euboea, they made a peace treaty with the Spartans and their allies for 30 years. And this treaty would still be in place at the time of the affair of Epidamnus, which was the immediate cause of the Peloponnesian War in 433 BC. And we'll have to get to that affair in the next video, but suffice it to say that Athens antagonized Corinth, and that following this clash over Epidamnus, there was a concerted revolt against Athens in the northern Aegean region of Chalkidiki. Plutarch writes, "Potidaea, under the dominion of the Athenians, but a colony formerly of the Corinthians, had revolted," and Thucydides adds, "Pericles, king of the Macedonians, had from an old friend and ally been made an enemy." So we can see that the Confederacy is unraveling. And I want to look at these next lines here from Thucydides. "Pericles induced the Chalcidians to abandon and demolish their cities on the seaboard, and settling inland at Olynthus, to make that one city a strong place. Meanwhile, to those who followed his advice, he gave a part of his territory at Magonia as a place of abode. Hatred of Athens is at such a pitch that people are willing to demolish their homes in furtherance of their secession from Athenian leadership. Back when Aristides was the head of the people in Athens, it was the happy time in Greece. Now in 433 BC, these are the lengths that the former allies are willing to go in order to oppose Athens. As part of the reason, Plutarch tells us that Pericles had raised the taxes on the Confederates by nearly a third. Now that must have been annoying, because the purpose of the tax had been the joint protection of the Greek cities against the Persians. The Persians are no longer an immediate threat. And in the speech of the Mytileneans, quoted by Thucydides, these are another people who would revolt against Athens in 428 BC, or around then. And in their speech, they say this: "We did not become allies of the Athenians for the subjugation of the Hellenes, but allies of Hellenes for their liberation from the Mede," now Mede as in the Persians. "And as long as the Athenians led us fairly, we followed them loyally. But when we saw them relax their hostility to the Mede and try to make the allies their subjects, then our apprehensions began." And there is no doubt that Periclean Athens viewed these people as subjects. If we look at the speech of the Athenians that is quoted in Book 1 of Thucydides, we can see their condescending attitude towards these allies. "We have a fair title to our possessions," the Athenians say. They consider their allies to be their possessions, and they continue to complain. Our subjects are so habituated to associate with us as equals that it makes them forget to be grateful for being allowed to retain most of their possessions, and they even go on to say the present always weighs heavy on the conquered. So the Athenians plainly view their allies and confederates as their own conquered subjects. A deluded Pericles says this in his famous funeral oration in Thucydides. Athens alone of her contemporaries gives no occasion to her subjects to question her title to rule by merit. He thinks the subjects have had no occasion to question Athens and its right to rule. This is proven false by nearly every historical episode recorded by Thucydides, who himself reports that the Athenians were not the old popular rulers they had been at first. And as we are talking about all of these rebellions from Athens, I want to read some amusing lines from Socrates as he is quoted in Xenophon's Memorabilia 2 on the subject of friendship and betrayal. And in these lines, we see principles that the Athenians have got away from. Socrates is wise. He wonders, wouldn't it be well to ask ourselves how much we are really worth to our friends and try to make ourselves as precious as possible so that our friends won't be tempted to betray us? For my part, I often hear complaints of this sort. A friend betrayed me. One I regarded as my friend gave me up for the sake of a mina. I ponder all this and reflect that when a man sells a bad slave, he takes anything he can get for him, and perhaps it is tempting to sell a bad friend when there is a chance of getting more than he is worth. And so if we do as Socrates says, and ponder and reflect on Athenian foreign relations, we might wonder that if someone is not a friend at all, but is a master, and furthermore is a master by force, then it seems to me one cannot put a price on betraying a master. So inherently good does it seem to the subject and worth every effort, expense, and sacrifice. The masters of the world are always betrayed.